The morning of my wedding dawned bright and clear, a perfect blue-skied day that seemed to promise a lifetime of happiness. I stood in the bridal suite of the old stone church, surrounded by the soft rustle of taffeta and the excited whispers of my bridesmaids. The air was thick with the sweet scent of my peony bouquet and the fizzy tang of champagne. My wedding dress, a breathtaking confection of ivory silk and delicate lace, hung from a carved oak screen, looking less like a garment and more like a symbol of all my dreams coming true. I remember tracing the intricate beadwork on the bodice with a trembling finger, my heart swelling with a joy so profound it felt like a physical warmth spreading through my chest. My phone, a sleek little device, buzzed insistently on the vanity table beside a half-empty mimosa glass. Mark's name flashed on the screen. A giddy smile spread across my face. I was sure it was a sweet, nervous message from my almost husband, a final "I can't wait to see you" before the ceremony. But the message that loaded was a block of text that felt like a physical blow. The words were cold, brutal, and utterly final. They spoke of financial disaster and sinking ships. They told me it was over. I must have read those devastating lines a dozen times, my mind refusing to process their meaning. The cheerful noise of my friends faded into a dull, roaring silence, and the beautiful dress on the screen suddenly looked like a relic from a life that had just been abruptly cancelled. A high-pitched ringing started in my ears, a shrill internal siren drowning out the world. The vibrant, happy sounds of the room, my sister's laughter, my best friend's anecdote about her own wedding day, the soft, processional music drifting up from the church below, all of it melted into a muffled, indistinct hum. I was standing in the center of the room, yet I felt completely detached from my own body, as if I were watching a movie of someone else's tragedy. My hands, clutching the phone, were bone-white and trembling, but they felt like foreign objects. My sister, Anna, was the first to notice the catastrophic shift in my demeanor. "Lily, honey, what's wrong? You've gone pale," she said, her voice laced with immediate concern. She put down her champagne flute with a sharp click and moved towards me. I tried to form words to give voice to the horror, but my throat had constricted into a tight, painful knot. All I could manage was to mutely thrust the phone into her hands, the cruel text still glowing like a brand on the screen. I watched her face as she read it, seeing the sequence of emotions play out like a tragic drama. First confusion, then dawning comprehension, and finally a flash of pure, unadulterated fury. "He didn't," she breathed, her voice a mixture of stunned disbelief and simmering rage. "He wouldn't do this. Not today. Not like this." But the evidence was right there in her hand. He had chosen this day, the day I had meticulously planned for 18 months, the day that represented the culmination of all my childhood dreams, to deliver this cowardly, soul-crushing blow. The door to the suite creaked open and my mother entered, her face a radiant picture of maternal joy. Her eyes already glistening with happy tears, she was dabbing with a lace-trimmed handkerchief. "Oh, my beautiful girl," she began, her voice choked with emotion, but the words died in her throat as she took in the frozen, horrified tableau before her. Her eyes darted from my ashen, stricken face to Anna's furious, tear-filled one. "What is it? What in heaven's name has happened?" she asked, her voice rising in pitch, tight with a mother's instinctual alarm. Anna, her hand shaking so violently the phone screen flickered, passed the device to our mother. The silence in the room became absolute, heavy and suffocating, as my mother read the message. I saw the light in her eyes extinguish in an instant, replaced by a profound, weary sadness that seemed to age her 10 years in as many seconds. Her shoulders slumped, and the handkerchief fell from her limp fingers. The news spread through the room in a hushed, horrified whisper, moving from my bridesmaids to the hairstylist, to the photographer who had just been setting up his equipment. The joyful music from downstairs now sounded like a grotesque, taunting melody. I knew, with a sickening, icy certainty that settled in the pit of my stomach, what I had to do next. I had to face them. I had to walk into that packed church and tell a room full of our smiling, expectant friends and family that the show was over. With robotic, unfeeling movements, I let my friends help me into my heavy wedding dress. The silk that had felt so soft and promising just an hour ago now felt like a leaden, suffocating shroud. As I walked down the long, carpeted hallway towards the sanctuary, guests who had stepped out for a breath of air turned to look. Their smiles of happy anticipation melted into masks of shock, confusion, and deep, uncomfortable pity. I forced my gaze straight ahead, my eyes landing on the conspicuously empty front pew on the right-hand side. His family's pew. They were already gone. They had known what was coming and they had fled without a word, leaving me alone to face the crushing weight of public humiliation. The rest of that day passed in a numb gray haze, a blur of fragmented memories and overwhelming silence. I have vague, disjointed recollections of my father holding me, his strong, solid frame shaking with silent, ragged sobs that broke my heart anew. I remember the kind, deeply confused face of the pastor, his brow furrowed in concern as he tried to offer words of comfort that couldn't penetrate the ice around my heart. I remember the long, silent car ride back to my apartment, still clad in my full wedding regalia, staring out the window at a world of people going about their normal Saturday routines, completely unaware that my universe had just ended. Later that evening, sitting alone in the darkening silence of my living room, the only light coming from my laptop screen, a new email from Mark arrived. It was longer, a cold, clinical dissection of his reasons, that felt like an autopsy on our relationship. He cited my unstable and unpredictable freelance career as a graphic designer, pointedly contrasting it with the security of a 9-to-5 job with a steady paycheck and a corporate ladder to climb, a path exemplified by his sister Amanda. He labeled my passion for art frivolous, and my investment in high-quality art supplies a reckless waste of finite resources. He stated with a tone of finality that he had come to realize he needed a partner with true financial maturity, someone who understood the hard realities of life and long-term planning. As I read the words, a chilling, crystalline clarity settled over me. The sentences were typed by Mark, but the vocabulary, the condescending sentiment, the very rhythm of the judgment, it was all his mother, Brenda. These were her fears, her deep-seated prejudices, her narrow worldview, delivered through her son's fingertips. I wasn't just being abandoned by the man I loved. I was being officially rejected by a family tribunal that had found me fundamentally unworthy based on their own rigid, materialistic definition of success and stability. The weeks and months that followed the cancelled wedding were some of the darkest, most desolate of my entire life. I moved through my days like a ghost, a spectral figure drifting through the rooms of my apartment, feeling nothing but a heavy, aching hollow where my heart used to be. I became a complete recluse, withdrawing from the world that felt too bright and too loud for my shattered senses. I deleted all my social media apps from my phone in a single decisive purge, unable to face the inevitable flood of pitying questions, the well-meaning but salt-in-the-wound comments, or the imagined photos that would have been posted from a wedding that now existed only as a phantom limb. I let every phone call go to voicemail, screening them obsessively until only the persistent, worried calls from my immediate family and my two closest friends were left. The physical evidence of the wedding was a haunting presence everywhere I looked, and I methodically, painstakingly dismantled it. I packed up every single wedding gift, the elegant crystal vases, the heavy silver picture frames, the impossibly soft Egyptian cotton linens, and shipped them back to the senders with a brief, polite, pre-printed note. The wedding of Lily and Mark has been cancelled. Thank you for your generous gift and your kindness. Sincerely, Lily. The shame was a physical weight, a leaden cloak I wore every moment of every day, a constant reminder of my public failure, of not being good enough, of being found lacking. But deep beneath that numb, heavy sadness, something small, hard, and unyielding began to stir. It was a cold, quiet spark of defiance. It was the first faint whisper of my own voice, a voice they had tried to silence, telling me that their judgment was wrong, that I was not the person their narrow minds had decided I was. My name is Lily, and while this story begins with a broken heart, it does not end with one. Oh, my heart was broken, shattered into a million jagged pieces on that cold church floor, and the process of gluing it back together was long and painful. But this is not that story. This is the story of what happened next. This is the story of my ultimate wake-up call. In the quiet aftermath of the devastation, I finally understood the true meaning of their accusations. My so-called bad with money habit was just their code, a convenient, dismissive label for someone who didn't conform to their rigid, corporate-minded, and deeply conventional worldview. It was their way of saying I didn't live my life on their narrow, predictable, pre-approved terms. They valued job titles, annual salaries, and climbing the prescribed ladder within a pre-existing corporate structure. I valued creativity, freedom, artistic expression, and the thrilling, terrifying process of building something entirely my own from the ground up. They saw my art supplies as a frivolous expense. I saw them as the essential, vital tools of my trade, the paintbrushes and chisels of a modern-day artisan. They never once bothered to look deeper, to ask me about my dreams, my ambitions, or my detailed plans for the future. They took a single superficial glance at the cover of my life and pronounced their final, damning verdict. Their judgment was a high, impenetrable wall they had built, and for years I had tried to find a door or a window to get through to them. Now, standing in the rubble of my would-be wedding, I realized I didn't need to scale their wall anymore. I would build my own house on my own land, according to my own blueprint. What they never knew, what Mark was too blinded by his family's opinions and his own preconceived notions to ever truly see, was my magnificent, powerful secret. While he thought I was irresponsibly frittering away money on art supplies, I was actually quietly, and with immense determination, building a digital empire. For 3 solid, relentless years, I had been running a wildly successful online business, a venture that was both my passion and my pride. I called it Sonder Designs. The name came from a beautiful, complex idea, the realization that every random passerby has a life as vivid, complex, and narrative-driven as your own. It was the feeling I tried to capture and communicate through my art. I created and sold digital art assets, custom-branded templates, unique design packs, and curated visual elements for other creators, small businesses, and marketing agencies around the globe. I spent my late nights and weekends not just doodling for fun, but building my website from the ground up, managing a sophisticated social media marketing strategy, handling customer service, and fulfilling dozens of orders a day from a growing loyal customer base. It was my passion, my sanctuary, and my secret triumph. That unstable and unpredictable freelance income he looked down upon with such disdain. My business, Sonder Designs, was pulling in more net profit in a single good month than Mark's entire annual salary at his stable and secure job at his father's company. I had separate, discrete bank accounts, and the balance in my primary Sonder business account was a number so significant it would have made his jaw drop to the floor. But I kept it all to myself, my own private source of pride, security, and silent rebellion. In the stark, painful aftermath of the wedding cancellation, I made a deliberate, calculated, and strategic decision. If Mark and his family were so utterly convinced I was a financial mess, I would let them believe it. I would lean into their narrative and give them exactly what they expected to see. I became a master of subtle performance. I stopped talking about my work altogether, deflecting any questions with a vague, "Oh, a bit of this and that." When acquaintances or former mutual friends asked how I was managing, I would just give a small, sad, brave smile and say, "I'm getting by, taking it one day at a time. It's tough, but I'll get there." I continued to drive my old, dependable but noticeably dented car, even though I could have easily walked into a dealership and paid cash for a luxury vehicle without blinking. I wore my same, comfortable rotation of jeans, well-worn t-shirts, and cozy old sweaters. I became the perfect, walking picture of post-breakup struggle, the woman quietly and valiantly picking up the pieces of her ruined life. I played the part of poor, heartbroken Lily, with a subtle, nuanced skill I didn't know I possessed. Every pitying glance from his mother's friends, every condescending piece of advice from a well-meaning relative about finally finding a real, stable job, was like kindling for the quiet, fierce fire of defiance that was now roaring inside me. I was gathering my strength, honing my focus, and I was doing it all in plain sight, hidden behind a mask of their own creation. I channeled all the pain, the gut-wrenching betrayal, and the white-hot anger I felt directly into my work. Sonder Designs became my obsession, my therapy, my sanctuary, and my most powerful weapon. I launched ambitious new product lines, invested in aggressive, targeted online advertising campaigns, and streamlined my production and fulfillment process to an art form. The business, which had already been a notable success, exploded into a phenomenon. The revenue didn't just grow, it multiplied at an exponential, dizzying rate. It tripled, then quadrupled, and then kept climbing. Within a single year of the cancelled wedding, I was a millionaire several times over, and not a single person in my old life aside from my sister had even an inkling. Anna was my fortress, my sworn confidant who guarded my secret with fierce loyalty. About 8 months after the wedding, she told me with a carefully neutral tone that Mark was already dating someone new. A very sensible and stable accountant named Brooke. She had heard from a mutual friend that Mark's mother, Brenda, was absolutely thrilled, gushing to anyone who would listen at her country club about how Brooke was exactly the kind of grounded, fiscally responsible partner Mark needed to build a proper future. When Anna told me this, I didn't cry. I didn't scream or get angry. I just smiled a small, private, knowing smile. My revenge would not be loud or dramatic or messy. It would be silent, immense, elegant, and utterly, completely inescapable. It would be the revenge of undeniable success. Almost exactly 1 year to the day after my wedding, that wasn't my sister called me, her voice buzzing with urgent, electrifying news. "Lily, sit down. You are not going to believe this," she said, the words tumbling out in an excited rush. She had heard from a reliable source deep within their social and business circle. Mark's father's company, Dalton Industries, the long-standing source of the family's wealth, status, and identity, was in serious, catastrophic trouble. They had lost their largest and most important client, a devastating blow that had ripped a multi-million-dollar hole in their annual revenue and future projections. They were now desperate for a huge, immediate cash infusion, a life-saving investment of staggering proportions to keep the company afloat and avoid massive, humiliating layoffs that would be reported in the business section of the newspaper. The family's pride and joy, the very symbol of the stability and foresight they had always preached about, was on the brink of a spectacular, very public collapse. The foundation of their perfect judgmental world was cracking wide open, and they were scrambling, panicked and desperate, to find someone, anyone, to throw them a rope and save them from the abyss. A few days after that momentous phone call, Anna sent me a link to a society column in the city's leading newspaper, the kind read by everyone who was anyone. The Hamilton Foundation, one of the most prominent, respected, and wealthy philanthropic organizations in the country, was hosting its annual exclusive black tie gala. It was the undisputed event of the social season, a glittering gathering where the city's elite and powerful came to network, to be seen, and to broker deals disguised as philanthropy. The article mentioned, almost as an aside in a piece about the guest list, that Dalton Industries was known to be desperately, frantically courting a major new investor to save the company from ruin. And the primary, almost mythical investor they were pinning their last, desperate hopes on? A reclusive, notoriously private, and wildly philanthropic billionaire known only by the enigmatic pseudonym Sonder, who was heavily rumored to be making a rare, personal appearance at the gala. My breath caught in my throat, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was me. That was the name I used for all my business dealings, the name on my official LLC paperwork for Sonder Holdings, the name that signed the emails to my high-profile clients. The Hamilton Foundation had been trying to secure a meeting with me for months, their politely persistent emails piling up in a dedicated folder, to discuss a potential multi-million-dollar donation to fund a new, state-of-the-art digital arts wing. I had been ignoring their requests, focusing on my business, but now I opened their most recent, beautifully crafted invitation. It was time. I clicked reply. The plan crystallized in my mind with a perfect, cold, diamond-sharp clarity. The season of hiding in the shadows was over. I would not be a secret anymore. I would go to the gala. I would walk into that opulent room, and I would show Mark and his family, and the entire city that watched them, exactly who Sonder was. I would show them that the woman they had publicly dismissed as a sinking ship was, in fact, the only life raft they had left in a stormy sea of their own making. I felt a sense of calm, purposeful resolve that I hadn't felt in over a year, a feeling of power that was entirely my own. This wasn't about staging a petty, dramatic public humiliation. It was about a simple, powerful public revelation of the truth. They had judged me without evidence, without curiosity, and found me guilty of being less than them. Now, I would present the overwhelming, irrefutable evidence of my success and simply watch as the weight of that truth caused their entire, carefully constructed worldview to implode upon itself. I typed a brief, decisive email to the director of the Hamilton Foundation, Mrs. Albright. Thank you for your persistent and gracious invitations. I would be delighted to attend your gala this weekend. Please expect me. Sincerely, Sonder. I took a deep breath, my finger hovering over the keyboard for a single suspended moment, and then I hit send. The die was cast. The long game was finally over. My preparation for the gala was a military precision operation fueled by a sizable budget and a fierce determination. I didn't just go out and buy a dress. I commissioned a world-renowned, notoriously exclusive designer, a man who dressed celebrities and royalty, to create a custom, one-of-a-kind gown just for me. It was a deep, shimmering emerald green, a color that screamed quiet confidence, immense wealth and powerful elegance, a stark and intentional contrast to the white wedding dress I'd never gotten to walk down the aisle in. It was sophisticated, impeccably tailored, and undeniably, breathtakingly powerful. On the night of the gala, a top-tier in-demand stylist came to my new, sprawling penthouse apartment, a spacious, light-filled, art-curated home in the city's most prestigious neighborhood that I had purchased quietly, through a discreet shell company, another secret held close. She spent hours on my hair and makeup, skillfully transforming me from the girl next door they all remembered into a sharp, polished, formidable woman of mystery, influence, and undeniable substance. When I looked in the full-length gilded mirror before leaving, I didn't see the heartbroken, naive Lily from a year ago. I saw a CEO. I saw a visionary. I saw a force of nature. I saw Sunda. I was ready for my unveiling. The gala was held in the grand, palatial ballroom of the most opulent and historic hotel in the city. It was a vision of breathtaking old-world luxury. Colossal crystal chandeliers casting 1,000 points of dancing light, walls draped in rich, crimson velvet, and the soft, melodious murmur of the city's most powerful and influential people, the gentle clink of fine china and crystal forming a delicate soundtrack. Waiters moved with silent efficiency through the crowd, offering flutes of vintage champagne and exquisite, delicate canapés. I made my entrance, moving slowly and deliberately through the throng of people, my posture perfect, my expression one of calm observation. It didn't take me long to find them. There was Mark, standing with his parents near the center of the room, a place that signaled their perceived, but now threatened, status. He looked stiff and uncomfortable in his rented tuxedo, his shoulders tense, his smile a strained, nervous grimace as he nodded at something an older, important-looking man was saying. His father, Arthur, kept glancing nervously towards the main entrance, his face pale and etched with deep anxiety. His mother, Brenda, was also relentlessly scanning the room, her eyes sharp, calculating, and desperately hunting for their financial savior. They were like passengers on the Titanic after it had hit the iceberg, dressed in their finest, but desperately searching the cold, dark horizon for a rescue vessel that bore the name Sonder. I took a deep, steadying breath, filling my lungs with the scent of expensive perfume and flowers, and began to walk directly through their line of sight. I moved with a confidence I felt deep in my bones, the emerald silk of my gown whispering against the floor. I saw Mark's eyes slide over me in a casual, uninterested sweep, then a heartbeat later, snap back in a classic, almost comical double-take. His jaw literally went slack with pure, unadulterated shock. He blinked several times, rapidly, as if trying to clear a confusing mirage from his vision. Then I saw his expression shift from shock to bewilderment, and then, most insultingly, to a faint, condescending pity. He must have thought I had somehow snuck into the party, that I was there as an uninvited plus one of some minor guest, or worse, that I had come to make a desperate, pathetic scene. He leaned down and whispered something urgently to his mother, his voice low and frantic. Brenda turned her head, and her sharp eyes locked with mine across the crowded room. Her lips, painted a severe matte red, pursed into that familiar thin, deeply judgmental line I knew so well from countless family dinners. She gave a slight, dismissive shake of her head, a gesture of pure disapproval, as if scolding a misbehaving child who had wandered somewhere they didn't belong. Mark broke away from his parents and strode towards me with a determined, slightly angry purpose, cutting through the crowd. He reached me and, without a word of greeting, grabbed my elbow firmly. His grip was too tight, bordering on painful. "Lily," he hissed, his voice a low, condescending whisper meant for my ears only. "What are you doing here? This is a very important, private, by invitation-only event. You don't belong here." He tried to steer me subtly but firmly towards a secluded side exit, his body language screaming panic and embarrassment. "You need to leave, right now, before you cause a scene and embarrass yourself." He looked around nervously, his eyes darting, clearly terrified that someone important might see him associated with me, the financial disaster. A year ago, his words, his touch, his sheer embarrassment at my presence would have filled me with crippling shame and sent me fleeing in tears. Now they just felt pathetic and small. I didn't pull my arm away violently. I simply looked down at his hand on my elbow, my gaze cool and unwavering, until he, flustered and confused by my lack of reaction, released his grip as if my skin had burned him. A small, serene, knowing smile touched my lips, a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, Mark," I said, my voice calm, clear, and carrying just enough to be heard by the elegantly dressed people nearby who were starting to glance our way with curious interest. My composure, my absolute lack of shame or panic, seemed to unsettle him even more than my presence had. Just then, a flurry of movement caught our attention from across the ballroom. The director of the Hamilton Foundation, Mrs. Albright, a woman renowned for her impeccable grace, sharp intellect, and steel-trap mind, spotted me. Her face, which had been composed in a mask of professional politeness, broke into a genuine beaming smile of relief and sheer delight. She rushed over, her elegant floor-length gown swishing around her ankles, her hands outstretched not for a formal handshake, but to take both of my hands in a warm, welcoming grasp. "Ms. Saunders, you made it. We are so honored, so utterly delighted to finally have you here as our guest of honor," she exclaimed, her voice ringing with sincere pleasure through the immediate vicinity. She completely ignored Mark, who was standing frozen beside me, his mouth agape, as if he had suddenly been turned into a pillar of salt. The shift in the atmosphere around us was instantaneous, palpable, and electric. Power, once held by the old money and family name of the Daltons, had just been publicly, silently, and decisively transferred to me. The color drained from Mark's face so completely and so rapidly he looked like a bleached, horrified waxwork figure. His eyes were wide, unblinking saucers of pure, undiluted disbelief. "Asunder," he stammered, the word a choked, broken, incredulous sound. He looked from my calm face to Mrs. Albright's beaming one and back again, his brain visibly short-circuiting, desperately trying to reconcile the two impossible images, the frivolous artist he'd jilted and the powerful, enigmatic benefactor his family was begging for. Mrs. Albright, still beaming with the triumph of having secured her elusive guest of honor, turned to him, misinterpreting his stunned silence for polite curiosity. "Oh, do you know our guest of honor?" she chirped happily, gesturing towards me with a flourish. "This is the brilliant, visionary mind behind Saunders Designs. We've been trying to get her to one of our events for ages. She's our potential lead benefactor for the new digital arts wing we've been planning. It's going to be a complete game changer for young artists in the city." The small, influential circle of people who had gathered around us had fallen completely, utterly silent, listening to every syllable. The silence was so profound, so heavy, I could hear the distinct clink of ice melting in a forgotten champagne glass on a nearby table. I watched, my expression neutral, my posture relaxed, as the puzzle pieces finally, catastrophically, clicked into place in Mark's mind, destroying the picture he had always held of me. I could see the memories flashing behind his eyes like a devastating high-speed film reel of every mistake he and his family had ever made about me. The art supplies he had mockingly called a frivolous waste of money were, in fact, the essential capital expenditures of a multi-million-dollar enterprise. The late nights I'd spent hunched over my laptop, which he'd petulantly complained took attention away from him, were the late nights of a founder building an empire from the ground up. My reluctance to share every minute detail of my work, which he'd labeled suspicious secrecy, was the prudent discretion of a business owner protecting a lucrative trade secret and a brand identity. It wasn't a character failing. It wasn't instability. It was staggering, monumental success. The financial disaster he had so cruelly and publicly rejected was the very same billionaire investor his father's company was on its knees, desperately begging for a lifeline. The sinking ship he refused to tie himself to was, in reality, the only vessel powerful enough to save their entire floundering fleet from going under in a storm of their own incompetence. The realization was a physical, visceral blow. He took an unsteady, stumbling step backward, his hand rising slightly as if to reach for a chair back or a wall for support that wasn't there. The dawning horror, the sheer, gut-wrenching regret in his eyes, was a more profound and satisfying revenge than any loud, dramatic scene I could have ever concocted. His parents, who had been watching the entire interaction from a distance with growing confusion and dawning alarm, now hurried over, their faces hastily rearranged into masks of false, strained, almost grotesque smiles. Brenda reached me first, her earlier disdain and disapproval replaced by a cloying, desperate, syrupy charm. "Lily, my dear. What a wonderful, wonderful surprise," she gushed, her voice an octave too high as she reached out to take my hand in a possessive grip. I didn't pull away, but I didn't return the gesture either. I let my hand lie limp and unresponsive in hers until she, flustered and deeply embarrassed, withdrew it awkwardly. Arthur, Mark's father, didn't even attempt pleasantries or pretend this was a happy social reunion. His face was gray with panic, his forehead glistening with a fine sheen of sweat. "Lily, we had no idea. What an incredible, remarkable achievement," he sputtered, his voice trembling with naked fear. He launched directly into his business pitch, right there in the middle of the crowded ballroom, his words tumbling over one another in a frantic, unprofessional jumble. "Our company is facing a temporary, easily surmountable setback, but with a strategic, visionary investor like you, we could not only recover but absolutely dominate the entire market. We have the infrastructure, the legacy, the name." He was pleading, begging, and everyone in the surrounding crowd could see it, could hear the desperation cracking his voice. I listened to him politely, my face a mask of calm, detached attentiveness, giving no indication of my inner thoughts. I let him finish his entire rambling, desperate speech, not interrupting once. When he was finally done, he looked at me, his eyes filled with a pathetic mixture of wild hope and sheer, abject terror. The crowd around us was holding its collective breath, watching this stunning, real-life drama unfold. I smiled a small, polite, utterly bloodless smile that didn't reach my eyes. Then I spoke, my voice clear, calm, and carrying perfectly in the hushed, anticipatory space. "Mr. Dalton," I began, and I saw a flicker of pathetic hope ignite in his eyes at the use of his name, a hope I was about to systematically extinguish. "I have a very strict, non-negotiable policy. I only invest in vision, in integrity, and in character. After a very personal and profoundly illuminating experience with your family's judgment, I have seen a demonstrated and undeniable lack of all three. So my answer is no." I let the final single-syllable word hang in the air between us, absolute, unchangeable, and resonating with finality. I then turned smoothly, gracefully to Mrs. Albright, who was watching the entire exchange with a look of fascinated, shrewd understanding. "Shall we," I said, my tone shifting to one of pleasant business, "adjourn to a quieter room to discuss the specific details of my donation to the foundation? I believe we have much to talk about." I turned my back on the Dalton family. I didn't offer another word, another glance, another moment of my time or my attention. I didn't need to see the collapse to know it was happening in real time behind me. I could feel it in the air, a seismic shift, the implosion of a family's status and pride happening in the void my departure created. I walked away on the arm of Mrs. Albright, my head held high, the emerald silk of my gown flowing around me like a banner of victory. I walked steadily towards my future, a future of significant philanthropy, artistic patronage, immense personal freedom, and boundless creative possibility. A future I had built for myself with my own 2 hands, my own formidable talent, and my own relentless, unyielding drive. Behind me, I left the smoldering ruins of my past. They were not ruins I had created through malice or a desire for revenge. They were ruins they had constructed themselves, brick by arrogant brick, with their own shallow judgment, their own profound narrow-mindedness, and their own glaring fatal lack of character. With every step I took away from them, I felt lighter, freer, more wholly and completely myself than I had ever been in the entire time I had known them. The fallout was swift, public, merciless, and played out across the business section of the newspaper for weeks. My sister, who kept a discreet but well-informed ear to the ground of our city's social and business circles, provided me with updates. Mark's father's company, Dalton Industries, did not secure the life-saving investment from anyone. The very public, very final, and very humiliating rejection from Sonder at the prestigious Hamilton Gala was a death knell for their reputation. It became the talk of every boardroom and country club, a cautionary tale about arrogance and misjudgment. Other potential investors, seeing that the legendary, infallibly shrewd Sonder had publicly deemed the company and the family behind it unworthy of a single penny, immediately and frantically pulled out of all remaining talks. The stigma was simply too great to overcome. Without the crucial cash infusion, the company was forced to downsize dramatically in a series of humiliating, publicly announced waves of layoffs. Mark, of course, lost his cushy, nepotism-secured no-show job there, the job that had given him the false sense of superiority to look down on my unstable career. And the very sensible and stable accountant, Brooke. She had been dating him almost exclusively for his family's status and wealth, the very things he had valued above all else. When both of those commodities vanished into thin air overnight, she left him almost immediately, a final poetic twist of the knife. The stability he had prized above love, above passion, above me, had proven to be the most unstable thing of all. I never spoke to Mark or any member of his family ever again. They tried, of course, with the desperate energy of drowning people. Mark sent long, rambling, increasingly unhinged emails, first full of groveling, flowery apologies and declarations of undying love he clearly didn't feel, then shifting to furious, blame-shifting accusations, holding me personally responsible for the collapse of his family's empire. His mother, Brenda, left tearful, pleading, and eventually angry voicemails on a phone number I soon had permanently disconnected. I deleted every email without reading past the first, predictable line. I blocked every new number they tried. Their downfall was utter, complete, and played out on a very public stage. But I felt no joy in it, no schadenfreude. I felt only a quiet, profound, and permanent sense of closure, like a heavy, ornate door had been slammed shut and locked forever on a dark, unhappy chapter of my life. I hadn't destroyed them. I hadn't schemed or plotted their ruin. I had simply been presented with a clear opportunity to save them, and I had looked coldly and objectively at their collective character and found it profoundly, fundamentally wanting. I had simply refused to rescue them from the natural, deserved consequences of their own actions and their own toxic worldview. I had refused to use the success they had mocked and derided to clean up the spectacular mess of the stability they had worshipped like a false god. My victory, my true and lasting victory, was never about watching them suffer or witnessing their downfall. My victory was in the quiet, profound, deeply personal peace of my new life, a life built entirely on my own terms. It was in waking up every single morning in my sun-drenched, art-filled penthouse, the silence a comfortable, chosen and cherished solitude, not a lonely, aching emptiness. It was walking into my vast, beautiful, purpose-built art studio, a space filled with the tangible evidence of my creations, with the inspiring smell of oil paint and turpentine, and the limitless potential of a blank, primed canvas waiting for my vision. It was the profound ability to write a single check to the Hamilton Foundation, a check with so many zeros it would make a banker blink, a check that would genuinely change the lives and futures of thousands of aspiring young artists for generations to come. The greatest win, the one that truly mattered and would sustain me for the rest of my life, was the quiet, unshakable, hard-won knowledge that I was never the problem. Their judgment was the problem. Their shallow, materialistic, narrow worldview was the problem. Their inability to see value in anything that couldn't be easily quantified on a balance sheet was the problem. And in the end, the only thing they truly, irrevocably bankrupted was themselves. They were bankrupt in kindness, in vision, in empathy, and in basic human decency. I, on the other hand, was richer than I had ever dreamed possible. Not just in monetary wealth, but in happiness, in creative freedom, in peace, and in the unwavering, deep-seated respect I had finally, triumphantly learned to have for myself. And that was a fortune, a legacy, that no one could ever take away from me.